essentially what happened is that people got made to think as individuals. We left the village. So when you go to places where the village is still the social mechanism which provides for the means of the people there, then you see well-being. So when you go to the outer islands in the Pacific, there's a marked difference from being in Christchurch. There's a marked difference from being in the bigger cities within a Pacific Island group, and there's a difference in kind of like in the villages that are still on the mainland but are still on the mainland. They're not on the outer one. So I think as people sought to have more individual wealth, the way that they were able to do that was to inflict the need, or someone was a good storyteller and said being an individual and having more for yourself is better than sharing. And that's perpetuated everything. It's perpetuated the current economic cycle, or like space that we're in. It's perpetuated in capitalism, all those kind of things, where when you're by yourself, it's quite lonely. Money doesn't buy happiness. When you're with your people, regardless if it's your relations or people, when you're with your inner circle of people and you're able to move in one space, in one direction, and you can disagree amongst that, but you can agree to whakakotahitanga of working together, then that's your happy place. That's when you feel safe, you feel vulnerable, you can be open, but individualization doesn't allow that. No, it's not saying that you can't have your own space and be in your own superpower, but if it's done without the support of the total, it's very, very limited. And so you see so we see in today's world the 1% that have all the resources. They can guarantee they're not as happy as the people who have nothing, because the people who have the least always give the most. Yeah, I think like the ability to access debt's become a lot easier. Like it's so easy. You can, in 20 minutes, we can have finance to be buying a $20,000 car. Like, it's got easier to be able to get access to essentially high risk money. Like, car finance, as an example, is high risk money. It's high risk to the person that's getting it, and that's why and it's high risk to the people that are giving it. That's why they have like 14 to 44%, interest rates on them. And I don't know how to articulate this, but we'll try. I see a time when the current financial system will not work anymore, because it's kind of winding itself into being irrelevant. And it's kind of almost there's a lot of predatory people that make finance accessible. And it's almost like it's winding, maybe it's like a tornado that's tight, and then it's getting larger and larger, and it's going to dissipate at some stage. And so there's a whole lot of predatory people that are trying to grab as much as they can by making it as easily accessible as they can. But there'll come a time when, and I think it's in our lifetime, where there'll be a shift away from that. There'll be a shift to value that comes from well-being, not from money or some type of trade mechanism will still exist, but I think that we'll see the shift away from that. I think if we look around at the impacts of the system that's predominant at the moment, is that the environment and the people are mawiwi, they're sick, because it's not essentially the system self-serving. It doesn't take into consideration that all parts are one and joined together. So we see that in ED units at hospitals right now that don't have enough staff, and the ones there are beyond fatigued. We see that in storms that are becoming more frequent, like in the Tairāwhiti, we've had 6 in 18 months on scale. And so we're seeing the signs of that. And probably that's a good analogy, is that you see the impact on the people and you see the impact on the land. And it's so obvious. No one can really refute of how big of a mess things are in. And there's no clear pathway to it getting better. I think for our tamariki and our mokopuna, for our next generations coming through, you are what you're surrounded by. So if we think of our generation that's grown up in hotel rooms, they're going to have some pretty substantial hurdles to overcome. And it doesn't mean that their parents don't love them and don't want the best for them. But there's going to be challenges that we haven't seen yet. And those whanau will, there's going to be a huge amount of healing that's needed for them. And that's for every generation. It doesn't matter which generation, there's always intergenerational trauma that's carried, whether it's, I think about the 28th Māori Battalion and the price of citizenship, and my grandfather and his cousins that came back, the ones that did come home, and the price that they had to pay in order for the next generation to come through. So all the PSD, all those that kind of trauma stuff now. Although, even if we're not conscious about it, trauma is passed intergenerationally if it's not healed. So we might not know consciously what the things are, what the mamae or the things that we carry, and many of us will never go to explore it. But if it's not healed in this generation, then it gets passed on. So those are some of the concerns of there's things that we don't understand yet because they've never existed before in our lived memory of those types of implications. And that's not just for Aotearoa, that's for all around the world. But in saying that, like, hope's massive, and we now are in a time of the ability to be able to connect instantly. What I've seen in the few things that I've been involved for with people that have a lot of healing to do because of systematic oppression is the need and want for hope and really good leadership. With the ability to connect, in the understanding that I have of lived experience, whether through living in this time or through stories that have been passed down intergenerationally, is that we're now in a time where those thoughts can be shared. So there's an ability for there to be a significant movement across a large scale. But it all starts with hope, that our young ones can be given hope quite easily. Trust being broken and people taking advantage of people in quite violent ways, whether it's physical, mental, our wairua, and the most significant happenings of that is when people's lives are taken. I think the next level down from that, so seeing that in suicides when people are so traumatized that they can't continue. So we have that within our whanau, we have that in all corners of society. And if you don't have a kāinga, a shelter that's safe and warm and your place of being, it's a lot easier for predators to be able to perpetuate that continued ongoing infliction. And I think that's at the highest level. That's like at the most, is when people's lives get taken. But then there's all the trauma that just perpetuates all the violence and all the types of violence, because that's their coping mechanism or their uncoping mechanism. So that ability to, that non-ability to have a safe home, a safe kāinga, is such a foundation to so much of the mamae that people feel. So whare ora is the remembering or creating of local resilience for the increasing of the well-being of whanau, and therefore the well-being of the whenua and the taiao around it. The crux of it is that it's decentralising and localising the ability for whānau, hapori, community, to be able to look after their own needs in that space. So it's developing the capacity, the infrastructure, the capability to be able to do that by a hapori, by a community, for themselves. So for us, no te papatipu o Uepoa Tuawau. I'm from a area in the Waiapu Valley under Maunga Hikurangi, about 2 hours north of Gisborne. And we, like all other places in Aotearoa, are suffering from really poor housing. And I've always carried a passion for that area. So the ability to, if you can house your people and you can feed them and you can give them meaningful mahi where they get to express their superpower, then that becomes the basic needs to then build everything else on. If you're living in a house that's mawiwi, that's sick, that has black mold, how are you supposed to do well in your mahi, do well in education, do well in sporting stuff, do well in give to the community, if of 365 days of the year you're sick for 60 of them, or 30 of them, or 90 of them? And so that was really the foundation where it came from. And it's the key part of it is developing the capacity within your own community to do it yourself, so that we're resilient from needing to bring things from externally. And our focus is act locally by doing it for our closest circle of people to us through connections, but then be able to take the learnings that we have from that and then share that with others, because everyone doesn't have to start in first gear. The taking away from the individual model to a collaborative model of, this is what we've learned, this isn't the way that we're telling anybody to do it, these are some of the offerings that we have. You can take them as you need and use them as you want, in your way, for your people. But we're keen to stay connected, to have a good relationship, so that when you bring your taonga or your treasures or your gold nuggets and innovate on that elevates the ability of it, then those can be shared around again, and then everybody elevates. So that rather than having a competitive model, it's a collaborative model. But it came out of the need of having whānau that as soon as we come into winter, all the kids have bronchitis for 3 months because they live in a cold, damp whare and it's overcrowded, and they don't have the knowledge, resources to be able to make the adaptation in their living circumstances. So that's where it came from. Whare ora it sits within Hikurangi Enterprises, and Hikurangi Enterprises was set up to increase well-being through sustainable economic development. So how do we create the resources that we need to be able to do increase our well-being of ourselves and the whenua and the taiao around us? So our view, our perspective, so our ecosystem that is our whare ora project doesn't just look at building houses. In the last 24 months, we've built 50 whare for whanau. But it's only one part of the ecosystem. So the way that we look at the ecosystem is for the whole value chain of building whare, how can we de-risk as much as we can over different horizons to be invested in that value chain. So for housing, for example, we build whare. All our timber is locally sourced. So we have our own milling team that's got a portable sawmill. They go out and mill trees that were planted by our grandparents. They mill them, they get brought back into our own workshop, they get processed, and they get put on as cladding on our whare. And those trees are all trees that don't need treatment. So that means that we're having less impact on the environment around us. So that's an example of a process within the program that allows kaitiakitanga, manaakitanga to come to fruition. The ripple effect of the benefit that it has for our community and the people that are involved is not just that the house gets built and the environment has a better product that's used to do it through less chemicals, through less carbon miles, through less trucking, all that kind of stuff. But it's the ripple effect of our own people knowing that they're utilising a resource that was planted by their ancestors for their own people. So mana is a thing that is given by other people to someone. If someone does something really well, then mana is afforded to them because they've done the do that's right. And so there's an increase in mana which goes beyond hope into self-belief that we're part of something that's greater. So that's an effect of the localization of the process. And so that's how we use timber for our cladding. For our timber, because we do stick and frame builds, is that we've been able to access laminated timber that is processed in Gisborne using local trees. So from a very whanau-centric model of literally only whanau hands touching those pieces of wood to a high-tech mechanicalized system, but it's still localizing the resources that we have. And so then when we go from our milling team to our building team, it's that same thing of the pride that they have, knowing that those are aspects of our program that don't exist for almost any other, or no other builders in Gisborne, because nobody else has access to the timbers that we have, even from the laminated timber stuff, because most of it goes outside of region. But they know that they're supporting their own people to have more jobs within their own hapori, their own community, so that the benefit stays local. Because every dollar that's earned in a community cycles around 7 times before it dissipates. So they know that what they're doing directly and indirectly has benefits for the community. There's quite often the saying thrown around that what's good for Māori is good for everybody, which I think if we look at Indigenous knowledge isn't around the South, it's for everybody. But the predominant thinking in the globe is like everybody's out for themselves, or we must get our own. Whare ora isn't designed specifically for Māori, it's designed for everybody. And the way that's embodied is, I have 4 beautiful children. They're gonna continue our whakapapa line, and they're gonna have children. I do not know who they're gonna breed with. And so when my selfishness of my my personal selfish bit is the ability that whoever that is with, we can give benefit to them. And I think there's another story there as well, was that I have a cousin who a number of years ago shared her whakaaro of what Māori is, of what to be Māori is. And it went something along the lines of when our Pākehā European tupuna came to Aotearoa, and we had our Polynesian tupuna that lived here, plus the tangata whenua, the ones that we've been here for a long, long time. It was when they came, when they were greeting each other, they got asked, our Pākehā tupuna asked our mana whenua tupuna from these lands that were already here, is, what are you? And their response was, we're Māori. Now what Māori was used in the context is, we're just normal people. So it wasn't because there was no cultural or racial thing, it was just like, we're normal. So the application of that is, to be Māori isn't necessarily, it is a whakapapa thing, but I see the beauty in people of all races of being Māori, of just being normal. And you know that when you meet with someone, you know that they're a good person. You can see their āhua, you can see their wairua, you know they're on point of looking after, of having a really beautiful heart for looking after everybody. To me, there's a whakapapa Māori and there's a being Māori, being normal. So the ability to be able to share that, and it can be called whatever, like Māori is just a word in this context. So the ability to be able to share that concept, and everybody knows within their own circles, like, yeah, that person is an amazing person. That person's got an amazing heart. And so to be able to contextualize that and share that, and it's always from having done it and showing something that people can taste, feel, see, breathe, that as long as they're open to experiencing it and hearing it and listening it or seeing it, then they'll be able to do that. Yeah, I don't necessarily think it's a question of scale or scaling something. It's just what's kind of become, what seems to be becoming clearer of late from what I can see, is that it's just a transformation. Is that the old net will always get left behind for a new net when it needs to, when the old net's not providing the kai that's needed. And so, yeah, we talk about scalability in the model, and here's a way that we can scale it by sharing with others. But again, it comes from that space of, this isn't how you should do it. Here's a learning, and here's the way in which the learning is done. Here is our koha to you. And so the more that something's given, the more that it can be given, as long as it's given to the right people. But I think that when we think about that kotahitanga, and the purity of what it is to look after others so that you can be looked after, is that it'll be really it'll be super challenging to try and individualize that. I think it'll almost protect itself. One of the things that we're being cautious of, and I've been thinking about the timings of this coming into a public space, is we have achieved some things, but we're still in first, second gear to be able to be in a space where it can be perpetuated out. At the moment, we're only doing it on a relationship basis, one-on-one, because people can see and understand it and they can see the value of it. Because as soon as anyone's told how to do something, it's kind of like, who are you to tell us what to do in our own space? And so we've been really conscious of, I'm going to be presenting here and I could be like telling everybody about this is the way that it should be done, but that's not how it's ever going to work. I think in the longer term, within my lifetime, that we're able to leave it a little bit better than it was, and we've got building blocks for the next generations to be able to do the healing they need to do to make it a better world for the next generation, because we're only here for such a small amount of time. So If I think about in my lifetime, there's a few goals that we have of being able to have local resilience in the Waiapu Valley to be able to build our own whare out of our own resources. The laws of average says I'm probably about halfway through my stint on this planet in this form, and that's achievable to be able to do that. On a macro scale, I think that we'll see the shift. I think we'll see the global shift, I think we'll see the global shift in our time.